Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, please do like, subscribe, share. That's the thing that helps us grow, and it helps you grow too. So thanks in advance for doing that. Also, if you get a chance, check out Planetary Citizens. It's our new book that covers the notion of planetarycitizens.net. What's it all about? Now, this week's guest is Lonnee Rey. She is author or publisher of a series of books called Rattled Awake, which is how I first came in contact with her. Actually, it was through LinkedIn, and it led to this. This particular one's a podcaster's edition, and I really had a great time working with her in providing my piece. She is just a sweetheart. You are going to love her. She's deep, she's wide, she's authentic, and she will certainly touch your heart. We'll be right back for a deep conversation. Don't go away.
Explore the thoughtless sphere. Embark on a life-changing journey of self-discovery. Embrace harmony with self, with others, with Earth. One world in a new world. Zen Benefiel skillfully ignites conversations, guiding guests to reveal personal journeys and perspectives. Listeners are inspired to seek knowledge and find wisdom in their own lives. Join this transformative journey as we navigate the depth of human experience.
Lonnee, it is such a great, exciting time for me to have you. We've had so many conversations and grown to know each other. This is going to be wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a great invitation. I was like, yay, let's do this.
Well, we've been circling around each other in various forms and worlds during this process. And so now we're going to be able to explore those because, as you know, we're working on exploring those inner and outer realities, how they merge, how they can be synergized, hybridized, whatever it takes, because we're usually bereft of having those inner conversations with others openly because the vulnerability level is just too much. And oftentimes that's relative because we're often seen as odd, weird, insane, all those kinds of things. And we're given the stiff arm and nobody wants to talk to us or at that level anyway. So that kind of creates this natural, it would seem anyway, a natural self-deprecating perspective. Well, we got 70,000 thoughts a day. Three-fourths of them are probably self-deprecating if you want to really examine how you think about yourself. We're up to changing that as the world is changing, and we need to incorporate our inner lives with our outer lives in order to have a whole life. So thanks for joining us to do that, Lonnee, because I know you're going to have some really interesting things. And speaking of those interesting things, how did it first begin with you? I know you've had a very interesting journey in life. When did you first recognize the interconnectedness?
Interesting that it was on a journey. I was a little kid. We just moved from Jersey to South Florida, and I was able to fly by myself, and I love flying. And so I was going up to
Now,
visit
this is
my
in an
girl.
actual plane, not out of body, right? Okay.
Correct. Yes.
We need to
And
differentiate that with these
yes,
conversations, right?
good point to make. Yes. And I very comfortable flying. So it really took me by surprise as my little, what was I, 11 maybe? Looked out the window, my 11-year-old self looking out the window, and all of a sudden this wave of panic hit me. And I said, oh God, I hope I'm wrong. I think we're going to crash. This plane's going to crash. Oh God. And I started to flip out. It was very out of character.
Hmm.
And a voice said, don't worry, it's not your time yet. And I snapped from looking at the out the window, and I looked around. There was nobody sitting next to me. I was like, okay,
Yeah, where
not
the
sure
heck
what
that
that
come
right.
from, right?
What the heck was that? But I went right back to worrying, and I looked out the window again. And I just couldn't shake this feeling. And the voice got louder. Don't worry, it's not your time yet. And I was like, wow, did anybody else hear that? Well, maybe not. And I was like, okay. So I hit the bell for the stewardess. And I was like, Coke, please. And that was it. Off we went. That was my first, audible
That's
assurance.
amazing. Now, I would imagine that many, if not most children have those kinds of experiences, but we never talk about them. I had a similar one when I first found out I was adopted, and I wanted to know if I could talk to, if I had a father and mother in heaven, if I could talk to them, right? And it turns out I could, had the same kind of experience. Loud, I mean, so loud that I knew my mother should have heard it, who was sitting 20 feet away. And so instead of engaging the voice, I spun around and asked her if she heard it. And she goes, no, must have been a peeping Tom. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I was 4.5 at the time, and it just didn't make sense, right? Because I knew what I heard, just the same as you, right? You knew what you heard. Nobody could deny that. Now, what do you do with it? Do you listen to it? Were you able to relax and make it through the flight without too much panic beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, once is crazy or weird, but twice. And I said, okay, fine. And I literally just relaxed. And I don't know what brought on the panic, but maybe it was just so I could know that I have an expression now, Zen, that I like to share, which is I am divinely guided, connected, and protected.
There you go.
And
Uh,
yeah, I've developed that over the last few years, but I think that's, that was my first experience of that.
I think as children, we have a natural proclivity to empathy of others because we are still so wide open psychically that if we're in that space, we tend to pick up probably first worst case scenarios, which is the fear of dying. And then it trickles back from there, depending on, the situation we're in. I don't know if that's true or not. That's a theory that I have based on the experience and knowledge I have in the research and study of the development of spirituality and what kids go through and how they're denied initially. And then you've got the opposite that are nurtured, right? Or at least maybe not nurtured, but encouraged.
I want to share something because I was encouraged in a lot of different ways. Pretty much my parents sent us wherever, whoever would have us on a Sunday. It could have been a temple. It could have been,
Right.
it could have been anything. It could have been like we were the only kids in the theater to watch Jesus Christ Superstar. I'm surprised they let us in because we were so young, right? Okay, they dropped us off wherever they could to get rid of us on a Sunday. So by the time I was 11, a hodgepodge of beliefs. Well, and this happened prior to the airplane incident. My mom let me know that she was thinking about putting a hit out on my stepfather. And yeah, I've had, quite so my mom wasn't
Things
exactly
happen.
like appropriate with her sharing. Okay. So I'm this little kid who's just been relocated from everything that she knew. And then mom dumps this. And this is like shocking. And so I'm laying in bed, Zen, and it was a very hot South Florida night, not a breeze. And I was like, I felt so lost. And so I decided to test, and I said, Jesus, if you exist, make 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 the curtains blow. I was making it up, man.
Right.
And curtains blew. And I was like, all right, that's once. Uh,
Yeah, that was an easy one. Let's give him
yeah,
a
yeah,
right.
do it again. I said, all right, third time's a charm. Make it happen again. I said, all right, we're good. And had a dream that night, and I know that it's a kid's imagination, but I wouldn't have thought to make this up. But in this dream, we were sitting on Earth and we were so big that we could put our hands and like this, on our knees, and he was pointing out all kinds of things about the world, about the galaxy, about the
Mm.
entire universe. We sat on the earth like it was a beach ball together. And I don't remember what the lesson was. I just remember the event. And so,
Well, I would say the lesson was that, yeah, you're like much bigger than you think you are, and here's kind of what else is available when you have time to explore.
no, what I mean is, I don't know what he was teaching me about the galaxy, but it was a neat experience,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, just the fact that you're there with him sitting on the earth, I mean, that would be enough.
yeah. Yeah, and then not long after that, there was a hurricane out over Cuba, and we were new. I mean, we learned how to swim, and all that, but the beach was closed, and my brother and I thought it would be really fun to go take our rafts down to Lake Worth Pier, and catch some waves. And like I said, the beach was closed, chained off. Okay, nobody. The waves were coming over the pier because the
Right.
hurricane was out over Cuba. But George, the lifeguard, was there, and George knew us. We were little beach bunnies, us kids, and he took us out past where the waves were breaking, and it was fun, but it wasn't really riding waves, and I kind of
Right.
got seasick with just the swells. All we were doing was doing
Sure.
the swells.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when the waves are that rough, you really can only either go behind them or try not to, get taken out by in front of them. So anyway, I got bored and I said, I'm going in. And so I'm paddling in, and I get to the place where I can kind of stand up, and a wave knocks me down, and I'm disoriented, and I try to get back up, and a second one comes, and now I'm eating sand, and then a third one, and I knew I was done. And um, and this is why I want people to not be scared of dying. It's one of those. It's a sub message. I don't get often the chance to share this. Thanks, Zen.
You're welcome.
Um, because what happens is at least what happened for me. I mean, you would think like you total panic, right? Oh my God, I'm drowning! I'm drowning! Help! 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 And then there's this pulling out of my body. I pulled out of my body, and there was nothing but peace. And I was like, well, shouldn't my little life flash before my eyes or something? Remember, I'm the hodgepodge of religion and,
Sure, sure. Yeah.
temples, and I'm a mess. But I was like, shouldn't that be happening? Shouldn't there be a tunnel and some light or something? I remember
Something, right?
something, right? All I remember was feeling so calm. And I was like, oh, this is all right. I'm cool with this. And then all of a sudden, it was like a kitten being pulled up by the back of its neck by its mom. All of a sudden, on this closed beach, there was a man who saw what was happening, who came down and dragged me out of this moment. Pulled me up out of the water, sat me down on the shore. You okay? You okay? Yeah. I didn't need resuscitation. Didn't need nothing. You
Hmm.
okay? Yeah. I think I am. I think, yeah. And I could be dramatic and say, he disappeared as he walked down the sand, but,
Right.
maybe he didn't. But I know I watched him until I couldn't see him anymore. And that was when I looked out at the ocean, and my brother and George, the lifeguard, had no idea because the waves were that big, had
Hmm.
no idea what had happened. And that was when it hit at me. Oh, wow. I think I almost just died, or maybe I did. And that was when fear set in. But in the moment when something like that happens, there is no fear.
Mm.
There's only peace.
Yeah, there's a release, there's a total letting go and
There
a
is.
sense of unconditional acceptance and almost like a warm blanket of love,
Yeah.
right? You're just totally free of everything, totally safe.
Yeah. But again, not your time. I
Yeah,
had
yeah,
another
yeah, yeah.
experience
Oh,
like that
that's just
where,
amazing. So phenomenal experience. And wow, that I can just imagine having had my own, right? That how that the transposition of consciousness and the process of being extricated and reintegrated,
yeah, that.
right? And then just going, oh yeah, I'm good, cool, right?
Yeah,
And
that.
nobody knows what's been going on inside your head, and the fact that you had such a reservoir of things to draw from in thinking about it gave you all those opportunities, so you weren't stuck in any one of them. I perceive. And so it gave you a much broader capacity to just experience it rather than get stuck in it.
I gotta
And
say, I was a little disappointed. I was looking for the tunnel and the light. I'm like, I'm ready to go.
yeah, but your time wasn't yet. And
Well,
I imagine you've had several instances of that occurrence. So let's move forward a little bit, right? When you began the teenage years, the movement into a little greater maturity, and we all know women mature earlier than men, right? So um, no argument there, right? So in that process, what did you experience as you were going through school with your classmates and others, and did you share any of your internal awareness, or did you find that it was difficult or challenging to do so and often got rejected as a result?
I didn't think it was anything special. So it didn't really occur to me to share these things. So
That's a
no, it wasn't.
very, now that's a very humbled response because you're right. It really isn't anything special, and yet it is.
I think we all go through it eventually. I've just had that and a few more times where I don't know, for some reason I'm still here fogging a mirror. Like
Well, and you're helping so many others to do so as well, right? You're giving through the work that you do. We'll get there in a minute. Back to your teenage years. What was that like? And in your progression and your early adult life, what were going on in there? I know you had some prep in preparing for the interview, and I don't know if we can draw some of that in, yeah or not.
well, things were such a mess in my childhood and teen years. Um I mean, like I at age 8, I overdosed on baby aspirin, then I got scared. Like I was trying to take myself out early. And the rejection that I got, go back to bed, and they didn't come see how I was, carried on to by the time I was 13, I was my mom, we she tried to kill herself, I guess. They said it was an emotional breakdown.
Mm.
And I was hoping that a train would hit me coming home from school. Like it was a battle to keep my chin up for many, many, many years. And
I think
uh,
that is so real, right? That's raw. And I think from my conversations with others, there are so many that go through that don't get an opportunity or don't have the guiding force within them to get them through it. And they do go out.
I I don't know. I think really honestly, the thing that kept me from actually taking myself out was that I was so convinced that I was a fuck up that I was going to mess that up too. And that I was going to end up, no, seriously, I was going to end up paralyzed and really regretting it. I would mess up trying to leave this planet. And
Right.
so
And not have the wherewithal to have a second chance at it.
that,
Right.
yeah. So it was
Oh,
fear of messing up my exit plan. And it was so hard to be here, especially, and this is the thing. As much as I want to encourage people not to be afraid of dying, when you have had that experience, and I've got to watch my words because I don't want to manifest this too often, but I'll say it this way. Dying's easy. It's living that's hard.
absolutely.
So there's that. And I don't want to make living hard, but dying is really easy. Don't be scared. Like, freaking live out loud, man. Slide into home plate with a well-used body and a heck of a resume.
Yeah.
Like, go for it because when it's done, it's easy. Bye-bye.
Hmm.
And it's peaceful, finally.
Now, how did you find that peacefulness? coming out of the disparity that you had during those years? And what are the kinds of things that you found that were key to helping you ascend into a new living awareness, let's say?
I have had I appreciate that you think I've ascended to a new living awareness.
You're
Um,
still here.
yeah.
That's a good indicator.
Um, yeah, I got a story about that. Um, so I have been studying a student of personal development, metaphysics. I started studying metaphysics when I was 21.
Mhm.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull opened my eyes.
First book I read, my mother gave me that in eighth grade.
My mom gave me that book too. Isn't that interesting? Eighth grade, that's young. So yeah,
I was a little advanced.
and my mom had become a trained. She spent 6 years learning. Her gift was to be a medium, not
Hmm.
a large. And what a buck. And
But I'm Ching.
right. So I
Just
was
don't
really
strike one, right? They become very unhappy.
um so she helped in a way to help give me some hope that as messed up as I was, there was a possibility that there was, some meaning to all of this.
Hmm.
And then along the way, a lot of shit happened. And I one of the things that I heard was you get to choose your exit ramp. You get to decide. And I had just gone through one of the worst experiences of disappointment and bullying like I'd never had before. I paid a group $2,500 to be in their collaboration book, and it went to hell in a handbasket. Bad, real bad. And um, and that was like and people, if you got to remember, if that one comment that you make might be the straw that breaks somebody's back. And that's
Hmm.
what happened. And on this particular night, I was I I I, I was beside myself. And I said, all I ever do is try. And almost ran, almost made it, almost for some things go awry. Here I am in the same position. Is it always going to be like this? Is this is this what I came to experience, which is just sheer and utter frustration?
I'm
And
sure. And it's likely to think that because you've experienced that same or similar pattern that you're recognizing in yourself, wondering, okay, what's up with this?
yeah, because I was in my 50s. By the
Right.
time you get to your freaking 50s and
You ought
you're
to know
still,
shit, right?
you'd think it would be different.
Right.
Right, right. There's that. And societal stuff. Oh, it's supposed to be different. Anyway, here's what happened. And I don't know where this voice came from. Maybe it was just me. But it said, and I'm absolutely wrecked, sobbing for hours. And it said, just quit. It's always going to be like this. Just quit. And a couple of times I got up and I'm sobbing, barely walking, and walking to the cupboard and looking at the sleeping pills, going back on, you know, shuddering with tears. Just quit. It's always going to be like this. It's never going to get any better. This is what your lifetime is. Just quit. And so I did. I wrote a note to the maintenance man. I said, I'm sorry you have to find me like this. I took the trash out. I put my keys and my baby picture on the table. It's the only picture I have from my past. And I said, sorry. And I'd already picked out my funeral song. And so I had that playing on repeat. It's a great techno song. I love Tiesto and Sarah McLachlan.
Oh,
Yes, yes,
TSO?
Sunrise.
Yeah.
It's a great song. Sunrise. Look it up, people. It's absolutely beautiful. Give me release. Give me peace. is the
Hmm.
chorus. And it's all I've wanted because it's, how many decades of freaking trying.
Right.
And then this thing happens then. And I don't know, I took 30. I don't know. I didn't count how many sleeping pills I took.
Hmm.
It was a lot. And I wasn't scared because I've died before. I'm just done.
It's like, okay, I'm headed out.
I'm
Bye.
just done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I was heading to the other room, I bumping into the walls because they're really hitting hard now. I hear a completely different voice that says, "Oh, you quit too soon. You quit too soon. Oh, you quit too soon." And then I got mad. And I'm like, according to who? According to what? Where's the fucking manual? Why can't I know? Where? According to who? God damn it. I was mad. And
Oh,
I said,
yeah.
I quit too soon. According to what? Who? What? Yeah, I, dang it. I can't even get this right. And I said, fine. And this is the thing I want to encourage. And I'd like to see more of this in the world, which is when people are like, you know what? I was wrong. If people could do that, miracles can happen. Here's what happened.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I said, okay, fine. On the outside chance that I'm wrong, because now I'm pushing, now I'm gaming with whatever voice is talking to me. I'm going to give it some unrealistic thing. I
Sure.
said, the outside chance that I'm wrong. Wake me up in the morning. Yeah, angels, wake me up in the morning. And I threw in, Jesus, take the wheel. And I went to bed to die. Well, that night, I had a dream. You know those dreams that you wake up talking?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I woke up and sat up because I thought my girlfriend was in my room at the foot of my bed. And I sat up to talk to Rochelle, which made me take a breath. I realized she wasn't there. Fell right back out. That's a lot of sleeping pills. Okay.
Yeah.
It happened again. Woke up, sat up, took a breath. She's not here. It happened 3 times. 3 times.
There's that trinitized energy again.
And you know what? If I was going to make it, if I was going to make it, I should have slept days. My ass woke up at 8 a.m. I was mad too. I put my feet on the floor. It was like nothing ever happened. And I said, fine, I guess there's more for me to do.
Hmm.
8 a.m., like not sick, not groggy, not nothing. It's like it never happened. I'm like, okay, I don't know why I'm still here, but okay. Fuck, let's go figure it out. Amazing.
That is, and so replete with intervention
Yeah,
and proof that there's more,
yeah.
that you are loved,
Well,
right?
that's just one part of it, hon.
And I
Here-
know.
Here's the other part. Here's the other part. And I'm gonna tell it to you this way. When I was
Okay.
in my early 30s, I was desperate for answers. And so I had a natal chart reading. And I didn't even know what a birth chart was at the time, but I was desperate for answers, right? Okay. And
I
by
couldn't
then,
do one. I adopted. I didn't know my time and place.
yeah.
Anyway,
Well, yeah.
interesting. It's like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah, I never thought about that. So I'm there, and it's a guy who really knows what he's doing, and he's got 5 other people with him that are learning. And and go sit over there, ma'am. We'll be with you shortly. Okay. So after like 20 minutes, the spokesman says, could you come here? Want to see if we're on the right track. And I said, okay. And we see here on the chart that you were you 3 when your parents got divorced? And I said, yeah. Hang on a second. Let's do the math on that. How is my parents and their divorce on my birth chart? And I said, is it all already done? Is it all already done? Has been my question ever since. But in that moment, the spokesman hedged and hawed and kind of kicked some imaginary leaves, and he's like, oh, well, something muttered something about free will. I said, free will? I said, it's on my birth chart that I was 3 when my parents got divorced. Seems to me that's already been figured out. Well, who's got the free will in this? And I said, it can look like free will that you take a left and you air quote should have taken a right because that's your free will. But maybe even that's on the chart. And we all went home with some questions that night. Yeah, you're laughing.
I am because I know, how pernicious you are. And it's just, you ask a lot of questions and you don't hold anything back. And well, it's the unique thing in my perspective of um, life in general. Everything's sacred and nothing is sacred. The truth deserves to be questioned and cajoled and whacked at until it shines. Otherwise, it wouldn't be truth. And right? So the more we whack away at it, the more it stands, the better opportunities we have of acquiescing to it and not in, be in complete denial of it. Right?
Absolutely. Question narratives, question
Yeah.
everything. When I was little, I wanted to write a book. Shirley MacLaine beat me to it, but I was going to write a book called What If?
Yeah.
And
Well, you
it was
reminded me of Alfred, right? Question everything. When that first came out in Magazine and Alfred E. Newman, right?
yes. There, when I call it Convid, when that hit, I my first .com choice, I registered ask why before you comply.com because I'm like, listen, I like shit that rhymes, but also
Well, you
ask
do.
why before you comply.
Right. Well, you're such a wordsmith too. I love it. Because so it's so rare that, especially in the moment, that we can string stuff together in such poetic fashion and it really brings the conversation up. It adds this additional layer of joy, right? Right. Because you laugh. It's not only humorous, funny, but it's also elevating because of the how you put it together. And I know most of your phrases are that way. They're meant to elevate, not to castigate, right? And so in that, and as you were talking about things, the birth charts, right? So I forget what year it was, maybe um, 89-ish, and I meet. I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, he was head of the Arizona Metaphysical Society, and he channeled an entity called Adamus, written several books. His name will pop up in a minute. And his West Coast coordinator was a co-producer of discussion and lecture groups that I was running. And so I went to their office to meet with her one day, and I walk in, and he's talking with his wife and her secretaries over there, and my friends and at her desk, and they're talking about astrology charts, and they're like, "Have you ever had yours?" I said, "No, I don't know my time. I was adopted. I've never been able to find birth records." And they said, "Well, Frank Alper was his name." He says, "Well, would you like to know?" And I was like, "Well, duh, yeah." And he said, "Okay, come on over here, sit down." And he had me sit down. He closed his eyes, put his hand on my forehead, and said, and his wife's name's Helene. He says, "Okay, Helene, write this down. 6:29 at 5:12 a.m. All he had was my birth year." Now, my parents had celebrated my birthday on the 30th of June. And I'm thinking, whoa, this is too close for comfort, right? And then he says, "Now wait, there's more." I'm like, what the WTF, right? And he says, 6 years, 2 months, 19 days, 11:43 a.m. And I'm looking at him really weird. And he said, "That's when the walk-in occurred." And I'm like, huh, that's weird because the voice I mentioned earlier, that happened when I was about 5. 6 and a half, we were already living in the house of my dad had built. So it was a new house. It's when I'd started my out of body experiences during that time. So I was still like fighting it, right? Doesn't make sense. I can see how layered, but there wasn't a walk-in. Maybe there was a new level of awareness that took place, but I've never bought into the walk-in thing. And yet there are many instances where it appears to be true, right? Because of the massive shift in the individual who had chosen to let go and leave and allowed someone else to come back in. Still really bizarre and fringe science, if you will. But the fact was that out of nothing, all he had was the year. He gave me something that was so close. And when I did the birth chart, man, everything was in Cancer. Mercury, Mars, Venus, my son. Um, I don't, it was like I was an emotional sponge, right?
We
Because
are
of what that.
sensitive little peaches, us Cancerians.
Oh my God. Well, I eventually, years later, I was talking with my parents, and they said, "Well, okay, we'll try and help you, find your birth records." And so we submitted non-identifying information forms to the state of Indiana Department of Health, and I got back. I was born in Indianapolis at 2:50 a.m. I'm like on June 30th. Like, oh, okay. So I did those, and still Mercury, Mars, Venus in Cancer. Mars
Wow.
is in Leo, and my moon's in Leo.
Oh
So that
boy.
gives me the bravado, I guess, or false or otherwise, right? I just have fun, right? And it allows me to have that fun and be expressive, right? Without being attached to it, because the rest of them are all very heart-centered um, signs. So that was quite an awakening, right? And because I thought I was born in Anderson, Indiana, for all those years. And now I found out it's Indianapolis. Still wondered about my birth parents, right? Wondering if, who is the weird one in the family that I got this from?
There's no explaining that one. Not when there's a walk-in involved. Doesn't
I'm
matter.
no, and yet I met my birth father unaware at a UFO congress in 19 or a conference in 1989
What?
in Phoenix, right? 2,000 miles from where we grew up.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was bizarre. Liked him as a man. Didn't, there was a fleeting thought when he said he was from Anderson. Okay, right? But I liked the guy.
And you're
And he
both at a
invited,
UFO conference?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, that's where it came from, right? But I didn't know then. I didn't know until 2019 when Luba had gotten me, my wife had gotten me a subscription to Ancestry as our first or my first Christmas present from her, hoping that my mother would show up. And she did. My half sister showed up first, then mom. We went back to spend a week with her that year during the summer, during my birthday as well. And it was just a wonderful reunion. And she had told me what dad's name was. And so I had a friend that did skip tracing and he tracked him down. He came from Anderson through Phoenix and landed up in Prescott. Sure enough.
Wow.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, I found a guy that was a Facebook friend of his. Now, he passed in 2017. So I found a friend of his finally, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I remember you." He was renting the house on the property that dad had a cabin on. And so there's like, oh my gosh, I was so magical, right? I wanted to meet them. I gave it up. The opportunity showed up without even me recognizing it. And maybe I did and chose not to pursue it at that time because I was so okay with not being raised by them because I had a beautiful childhood. And yet, here was this um, opportunity to feel a little more grounded.
Well, I'm glad you had it that way, Zen. When I wrote, and I really genuinely am, because not everybody has that. I believe with all my heart, those that are adopted have a certain sense of, well, there's going to be a loss, there's going to be natural questions and all that, but you've been chosen by another family, and that is a beautiful thing. And a harder thing is to be with a birth parent and not feel wanted. And what happened when I published Life Lessons Learned from a Lousy Mother? Um, that's a new cover I put on that. Did
Hmm.
you see that?
I
I
haven't
was
yet.
tempted
No,
to show it.
not lately.
It's it's okay. Oh wait, hang on. Here it is.
Okay. Ah, that's wonderful.
So it's a little book,
Yeah.
and I put this out, wrote it in 5 days. It had been on my heart for a long time, but wrote it and it's full of solutions, doesn't stay in the pain, yada yada. Okay, good stuff, right?
Hmm.
Well, here's what happened. I get some messages on Facebook. Oh, loved your book. And I was like, oh, a bunch of ladies like my book. And oh, look, they left reviews. Oh, maybe it's making some waves. Maybe this matters. Because I said, I'm not a mother. And I wrote that for Mother's Day for all those who didn't have June Cleaver for a mother either.
Right.
And um and then this is what happened. It turns out those ladies introduced themselves as my aunts, and they were the sisters of my mom who was adopted into their family. And oh, by the way, my half sister did a DNA test, and that's what led to this conversation. And I said, hang on, my parents told me she died when she was born. And my father even made up stories that he would visit her at the cemetery and did I want to come someday. And it turned out that we were in the same high school together at the same time, 2 years apart. I mean, what? Right.
Yeah. And,
So
and never recognized each other.
how could we? I thought she was dead. They told me she died. My
Right.
mom went along with the story. Turns
Yeah.
out that my mom was carrying somebody else's baby when she and my dad got married. And he
Mhm.
said, like hell am I going to raise another man's child? She's going out for adoption the minute she shows up. And I said to this girl, and she's like, I want to know what my birth mom's like. I said, you read the book, didn't you? I said, you dodged a bullet, hun. You dodged a bullet. And I frankly didn't want to meet her. I had nothing in common with her. I had nothing in common with these other people. Oh, you got aunts and uncles and cousins. And oh, I don't care. I'm sorry, not sorry. I don't care. But what a
Yeah.
way to find out that my parents had both been colluding and lying my whole life about yet another thing. Goodness gracious.
Well,
So,
here's this brings up an important part. My birth mother. I was the last one on her bucket list. I have a half sister 4 years older, half brother 4 years younger, three different fathers. Okay. She was young enough with my sister that she couldn't afford another child. And dad split once he found out she was pregnant because her mother was pressuring him to marry her. And he said, no, I'm out of here. I'm going to go become an actor in New York, is what he said. And then he went west. But later, of course, 30 years later. Um, what was interesting, though, is that on my mother's birth or deathbed, she blurts out something about the child she gave up for adoption that she's never let the family know about,
oh, great.
right? So there were five other aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters of her mother, right? And several other, you know, brothers and sisters in the family. And nobody knew about it until then. Well, that was 10 years and well into three different bouts of cancer that were now had gone in, and a fourth showed up, and all four were in remission when she and I met. The following year, they all came back, and she was gone within a year and a half after we met.
Wow.
Now, that is to me is an example of holding stress.
Mm.
It manifested in her body because she was beating up on herself so bad, unforgiving, unwilling, and silent that it just lodged in her body. And then she had those events happen. Be that true or not, energetically, it makes sense. We don't have we have some psychology in medicine now that would indicate that possibility, not necessarily the reality yet. Um, However, it makes sense, right? Knowing what we know about energy and its influence, especially when you hold it, it's going to do something, right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly constricting your own energy from being who you are, what's going to happen? You're going to eat yourself up inside.
It's like drinking poison.
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond that, right? When we met, there was no regrets, no, she still had the angst, and by the time, which is why I think maybe she was able to let it come and leave, there was no, I loved her unconditionally from the get-go. I had no reservations, no regrets, no anger, resentment, anything. Now that may be odd. I don't know. It's just when you love, you accept what is, right? Everything's
Yeah.
perfect as it is. We just got to figure out how. So speaking of now, how did you figure out the perfection in how you had experienced life to date? And then you go into this period where you're doing just the opposite of what that 2,500 hit was, right? You are drawing people in, giving of yourself and helping them share their voices like we did with Rattled Awake, right? This is a perfect example of your commitment in service to others. Now, how does that, what did you have to go through, or what did you go through internally to reach that state and then learn how to give back?
It was I'm going to put it this way. My hand was forced. Um, so I had been already working as an editor, um, helping people with nonfiction,
Mhm.
self-help, um, and story development, under the guise and guidance of someone else. Um, and
Now,
then
before you
I
go into this, the guides and guidance, I want to also recognize that you have met some outstanding and prolific and well-known authors in your journey as well, and worked with. So just so the audience is aware of that from the perspective from which you're sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate you throwing that in, Zen. It's odd that, it was 30 years ago that I was sitting in multiple Speak and Write for Millions weekend workshops and trainings and seminars. Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield had just launched Chicken Soup for the Soul after 144 rejections. They finally got printed, and they were
Hmm.
doing these workshops, and I was literally working side by side with Mark, and privileged to sit in the audience of many of these things and talk with him afterwards about, how his message came across, because I wasn't in his circle. And see, this is a very, I didn't even plan on this. When a third party, you're smiling, when a third party comes in, they see more than the participants, and we know that in our head. But he really showed me the value, and he said to me, "You don't even know your value to me." Because I was a fresh mind, not in his circle, not at all in that world, and I had an aptitude for marketing and a word nerd
Hmm.
and communication.
In spades, word nerd,
Yeah,
wordsmither,
word nerd. Yep, yep, yep.
wordsmithy.
Yes, yes. And so it really was his feedback that made me recognize the value of someone else being able to come in and go, hang on, let me pull this from you. Look at that. Let's spin this into something. And so so fast forward, excuse me, a couple years ago, I had just come off of a great ghostwriting job. I manifested. I was like, I'm worth a lot more, and I broke away from the guy that I was working with, and it was the best paying job I'd ever had. I found out from someone else I should have charged 15,000 more because I know all the stuff, all the things to be called a book producer. Not, she said anybody can, this revered
Isn't it
talent.
funny how we limit the imposter syndrome, right?
I didn't know that it was called a book producer, though. I didn't know. I knew I had
Right. Well,
value. I
none of
just
us
didn't know.
do really. We just build our skill set. We do what we do. We don't recognize the value in the marketplace because we're having fun doing it.
Well, I'd never had to do it either. Like it
Yeah.
was completely new territory. Just like the time my very first freelance gig, I was paid like 75 bucks, and the book became the 2023 Best Indie Book of the Year.
Hmm.
What? So like it wasn't, I just didn't know what I didn't know. So anyway, I'm
Good
excited.
point. Let's edify that point. We don't know what we don't know. So, what does that promote? Curiosity.
Meow, I'm that cat, like I want to know
Yeah,
what's over here.
well, yeah, you want to know. You ask questions, turn over the rocks, flip the stones, right? Turn the
Absolutely.
pages.
Curiosity is everything, and
Right.
that's like that's how we keep growing. Stay
Absolutely.
curious, stay open.
Yeah.
And in this case my hand was forced, and I say that quite literally then, because I went roller skating for my 60th birthday, and I fell and I broke my wrist in two places extremely badly, and my hand doesn't bend anymore. So I can't, I'm one-handed Wanda now. I do everything with one hand.
Oh,
Uh-huh. And I tore my shoulder. It got re-injured twice. It has been a nightmare over the last 18 months. And the reason that,
this too shall pass.
well, the reason that all these books that,
Yeah.
Rattled Awake, or there's 12 and then there's four more,
Yeah.
it came about, it was out of necessity, because I couldn't type. I couldn't sit. I broke, my tailbone. I got hurt.
Well, the necessity actually was your creative side going, okay, what can I do with what I have?
And it was somebody who, so see, here's a third party again. Somebody came
Yeah.
along and said, "Did you know that people can write a chapter in a weekend?" And I was like, "No, but I'm open. I'm listening. I'm listening." And then I realized the way he was doing it didn't work. It didn't work. And so I have completely changed the program. And the gratification that I get seeing what happens to the authors' lives uh, through this process and then after is the best, most rewarding work I've ever done. So, as challenging as it has been, and honestly, I had no idea. I did not know shit from Shinola when it came to certain things that were required to make this happen. But I'll tell you what, as soon as a need arises, so will its solution. Stay
Absolutely.
focused on the what, and the how makes itself known.
And the right questions.
How can I
Right.
starts the ball rolling? How can I?
Yeah. Not, oh shit, I gotta, it's,
Well, there
oh,
were lots of oh shits, but
well,
ultimately,
yeah, that goes along with it too. However, they come after, well, how can I? And then, all right, so there's these things, and it's like Rilke says, ask the questions and shut up. Let life offer the answers because it
yeah,
will.
yes.
You try and figure stuff out on your own, it's not going to happen because you're just in your own head with your own information and you're stuck.
You don't have a choice. I have
Right.
no body. I have no body backing me up. I don't have any other source of income. I don't have anything else to rely on. And so, you do what you got to do to keep going, because you
Sure.
can't just lay down in the middle of the floor and die.
No, you can't. Well, you tried, and that didn't work,
That
right?
didn't work
So,
either.
and yet you're a perfect illustration of, okay, I'm here, I'm now, um, I'm available, help me, and you're willing to step into whatever breadcrumbs show up in front of you as a result of that curious question.
Absolutely, and I want to add this part too. Not only did I have a bad experience with a collaboration, my very first ever, but I wanted to make it so that nobody nobody would feel like I did when I felt so disappointed, so frustrated. Am I ever going to be able to get anything published ever? I
Hmm.
had no idea what to do. I was getting quotes from people that were ridiculous. And that was just to promote the book. And I didn't even know how to start writing a book. I had no idea what to do. How the hell is this going to work out? And here I am, 30 years later, after being in all of Mark's stuff and feeling like kind of like more than a late bloomer. And I'm going, what? How? How? And I didn't want anybody to ever have that feeling again. And I'll tell you something. In this book, Bullied, How I Got By.
Mm.
Short stories from people who've lived to tell about it, literally. I cried every day producing this book
Oh,
because
no
their
doubt.
stories are so hard. And there's multiple stories by multiple people in here. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because all of these people got a chance to tell something that nobody would ever give them a chance to do before.
Hmm.
That's why I do what I do.
Well,
Because,
this is so beautiful, Lonnie, because we want to be heard. We want to be understood. The two things in life that drive us are to love and be loved. And we seek those things, whether consciously or unconsciously, in everything that we do. Unfortunately, we learn ineffective habits and patterns early on in life that don't really take us to that. And until we have some kind of traumatic event that rips everything else away from us, can we fully say, okay, what do I do?
yeah, I sure as heck didn't see it coming. This was never on the list.
Yeah. Well, we
But
never do, right? All we have are the intention of wanting to serve and to love and be loved. There's a
yeah,
lot
well,
of
the
shit
love
in
and
the
be
way of
loved
that,
part,
right?
that has been touch and go. I'll tell you something. When you give people a great deal on something, they don't necessarily express a great deal.
No, I totally agree with that. And
That's a shame.
that speaks to them, not you.
Granted, but I still go through the same ruminations every time.
Oh, absolutely. I
But
totally get it.
I really got to give this one guy a shout out. I got
Okay.
to.
All right.
Then, in this book, The Advocates, the Healers, and Heeding a Higher Calling. So Chris, Chris is it. Chris, I've got to do this. This is his dream come true. I've never seen someone so grateful in my life. I love you, Chris. So this is Chris. I know it's not all that clear. Chris Monastery.
Okay.
Chris is on a mission to save teen lives because at age 17, the day before he was supposed to go to boot camp, he was in an accident that paralyzed him.
Mm.
That was 47 years ago. And he has been wanting somebody, please help tell me, somebody help him tell his story. And he got let down so many times. Nobody, it didn't work out, didn't work out. I called him and I said, hey, hon, I'm doing this book called The Advocates. And
The fact that you
I'll,
called him is above and beyond.
I'll type out your story. So let's do this. He says, I haven't been this happy since the day before the accident 47 years ago.
Wow.
He's over the moon. He makes all of it worthwhile. He is on a mission to help save teen lives because of what happened to him. This book is helping him do that. That's why it matters. Thanks for letting me share that.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's these little things that most of us are unaware of because we're not paying attention, right? We're too involved in the day-to-day and the tunnel vision of what can I do to get what I want instead of how can I be more fully present in life and give back,
Yeah.
right?
He's never, I mean, I've never, he's been,
Because we're such takers in our society, and
he's
I don't know
not.
if it's just in America or the world, but we are such takers. We don't, even the phrase "take care."
That's a good point. Where do I take it from?
Exactly. I got to a point, and this sounds really silly and off the wall, but somebody says, "Take care." I say to them, "Only if you give it. I'm not a taker. Thank you." And they go, what? Right? Because it's so ingrained and so internally programmed that we feel like we have to take from the world. And this is where we
Oh,
have that scarcity mentality. That's where it comes from, right? It's abundant. We have food, clothes. We have enough for everybody to be taken care of. We just don't distribute it correctly because there's poor leadership and faulty systems. And that's part of what I'm working on correcting with planetary citizens and showing how it can be done. Because I'm an old systems guy in the aerospace industry. I began to understand systems. I was in charge of $7 million a month, 800 part numbers. And so I had to understand everything that went on in the manufacturing environment, both from a material standpoint, as far as machinery and process, because I came out of being, I was a machinist, and also on a soft skills level of how to get people to do what I needed them to do without forcing them. And so, and in the process, it's funny, I was the youngest person in the department, 35 people. And in 6 months, I rose to the top of the production chart. And I had two supervisors show up in my cubicle one day, and I'm thinking, oh shit, what did I do? Right. And then, like, they see the look on my face. It's like, no, no, no. And it's, we want to know how you're doing your job because you're up here and we've never had that happen. And I said, well, it's Midwestern values. I want to treat others how I want to be treated. And it's interpersonal skills classes that need to be, that's where I went to, right? And man, I fought for those for 3.5 years until I left the company, and then found out a year later they'd instituted them plant wide after I brought in the consultant and went through all the rigors and the demotions and the the shunning of everyone in the department when I first brought it up and all that kind of stuff. And yet I'm just a company guy. I want us all to work together better, right? Because that's how it works. Well, when you've had a history of that throughout your life and not being in any industry longer than 5 years, it limits the retirement availability, right?
I do. I'm a
Like,
professional tumbleweed.
yeah. Oh, that's a great one. A professional tumbleweed, right?
Yes.
Reminds me of when I was working in 1981, right before moving to Phoenix, um, working as a machinist, a meat cutter, and playing in a band, played drums, still do. And all three jobs fell through in a day, in 3 days. And so I walk out on the front porch the next morning and I literally throw my hands up to the sun. And I said, okay, I'm listening out loud. Where do you want me to go? And this is a little podunk town called Alexandria, Indiana. I, I heard Phoenix. So I'm thinking the whole Stephen Wright thing with the, elevator opening up and the tumbleweed falling out. I just instantly went to that in my head as soon as I heard that. And 3 weeks later we moved. Been here since 1981 and gone through, I don't know how many iterations of self in the process. And yet it's always gotten better. Always. Just like you, right? You have been climbing this ascension ladder or whatever you want to call it to the point where you are truly being recognized for you by others and feeling that right, the disappointment is beginning to fade and the acceptance of who you are and what you're doing. I just have the utmost respect for you.
Thank you. It's so easy for us to focus on the little tiny tag that's still got the thread that's at the back of the dress that we love. And instead of looking at all the sparkles, it's the little freaking thread in the back that gets our attention. And so I wanted to just admit to that and also encourage those who have had a touch and go with people shunning them because they have different ideas or rejecting them because whatever people, apathy is running rampant,
Mhm.
and stay focused on the sparkles on your dress because that little tag can get cut out and it can go.
Right.
And stay focused on the reflection in the mirror that is so beautiful. That is you.
And learn how to say, I love you. Our purpose is oneness. that's an amazing thing that um, when I was going through after I left the aerospace industry, I was going through a divorce at the time. I got demoted the same week my divorce was final. Interesting numbers on that one. 11/22/88 was when it was final. Talk about some power numbers, right? Um, and the church tried to expel me because
Awesome.
my wife my ex had told the bishop that I was having affairs.
Oh no.
I didn't have time or the notion, right? I was working 65, 70 hours a week, going to school at
Wow.
night and doing my church duties. And I was an elder in the Mormon church at the time.
Wow.
So this just ripped my world apart. I gave my best foot in every direction and got shunned. And so I said, okay. And talking with my dad a little later, my adopted father, who was a 32nd degree Mason, worked for General Motors as a tool and die maker for 38 years and then retired. He said, you know, you got to find a company, work for them, retire, do all this. And I said, Dad, I tried it your way. It didn't work. I got rejected. I tried to do my best and be my best in all three areas of my life, and I got rejected by all three. So fuck off.
Yep.
I was really because he was, you know how dads are. They're going to try and tell their stories and
Yeah.
impart their wisdom and things like that as much as they can. And I appreciate that, but there comes a time when you got to recognize it ain't working.
Yeah.
So well, now what do you do? And from that point forward, unfortunately, we never had the kind of relationship I wanted as a result of that. He would say, God damn it, I don't want to hear any of your spiritual bullshit.
Well,
Um,
we have very much in common with that, Zen. And I'm sorry that you did too. So you can
well,
understand
that's
this.
part of the connective tissue we have that
I,
we're
I,
uncovering, right?
literally on
This
my
is this
dad's,
is that apocalypse, right? We're uncovering the
it
knowledge,
is,
we're
it
uncovering the
is.
connection.
And these 80 something year olds, they had their idea about how you should live your life, and if you're not doing it, you're doing it wrong. And my father was literally on his deathbed, and I'm standing there, and he's gonna go that night. We all know it. And and he turns to me and he says, "You could have been something." And I'm like, "But you just told me that I'm 55 and I have my whole life ahead of me." And I didn't feel very young at that time. But from an 85-year-old man's point of view, 55 was young. I get it.
Sure. You're
And
still
I
a
said, "But
baby, or
you
one
just
of them.
told me I got my whole life ahead of me." And he reiterated it, Zen, and he said, "You could have been something. You could have been on Fox News." And I was like, "Oh, okay, thanks." It said, let's not count all the times that things I've done. I've worked in film and television. I was a guest on Tyra Banks. I was a guest on Steve Harvey. I've done, theater. I've done all kinds of shit. I hadn't done the books yet. But like, let's focus on the
You're
things
leading up
I
to
think
it,
I
though.
should have done,
Yeah.
right? And let's just ignore everything else.
Isn't it funny how
Wow.
the ones you care for and love most can totally destroy your self-confidence
Way
in,
to go
in
out. Way to
one.
die, Dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like
Jeez.
I feel so sorry. Um,
Let
and
me
yet it
just
is what it
super
is,
wrestle
right?
my kid on their head on my way out. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate it. I could have been on Fox News. Okay. But you're telling me I'm too old, not hot enough, and my time has passed. Thank you. Got it. Appreciate that.
Well,
Have
you
a
know
nice
what?
night.
The 60 is the new 30.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be
I'm
62
feeling it.
this year.
I'm feeling,
62 going
I
on
feel like
40.
I'm in my pristine, with the wife, the twin flame, the camaraderie, the depth of the relationship that we're developing and the intimacy that we have and the
Oh, that's awesome.
unconditional love for each other. That doesn't mean we don't have situations where we disagree on stuff and got to work it out, right? That it just makes it that much easier to step back and deal with the situation and not the personality,
Yeah.
which is that's usually the difference, right? We try to deal with personalities instead of situations.
I'm glad you have that, Zen.
I can't tell you that it just I waited 30 years. Was divorced in 88. And in 20, well, almost 30 years, 2017. is when we got married. So it just it totally changed my life. I've had people tell me I look 10 years younger now, and I feel it, right? And there's this childlike, like Jesus said, right? Be ye as little children. And it is so, especially, my wife came from the USSR. Tough to be a little child there because they take them at 5 and run them through their whole educational system, which is far superior than anything on earth that I'm aware of. Understanding how it works now. Didn't prior to meeting my wife. And even having taught high school for 8 years and being trained to do so and all of that, um,
Wow.
the systems are just vastly different and they're more holistic than we are, which is why we need holistic education. Whether there's 5 aspects, 5 relationships that I'm aware of that we have that we ignore: body, mind, spirit, planet, cosmos. As we get older, we recognize that those exist and we want to fine tune them. Well, why aren't we teaching our kids this? If we know this, then why aren't we putting it back into the system?
Because it's a planet of control and chaos,
Currently,
and
correct. And that's part of the evolution of a civilization. We go
just
through phases. It's like territories, tribes, regions, nationalistic, right? We're moving from, and this was the whole point behind planetary citizens, is moving from nationalistic perspectives to planetary perspectives. We are one people, one planet. We share it. Let's figure out how to share it wisely and help each
yeah,
other do so.
yeah. It's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of consciousness and caring. And if,
Absolutely.
if that could be, oh, just tweaked a little bit, if you guys could invest half the money you do in weapons of war and look at it as everybody can have enough, and you can still have your billions upon billions, whatever you value. At least don't, like gyp people
And
and
I
hurt
honestly think,
children.
with the military strength that we have and the training that is within that, we've got my 2 stepsons are in the Navy now. One's navigating the submarine in the middle of the Pacific right now, his first tour. And so he's the high skilled, and they're watching him, they're bringing him up. At the graduation from his training, we went out to eat. He picked the place, and it just happened that the admiral that spoke at the graduation of 1,100 sailors was at the restaurant too, and walked by the table to congratulate him.
Oh, wow.
I said to him, "You'd think that's not a setup. You just wait." Right.
Oh,
So, and the other one who's 8 years older um, is in Okinawa now, and so he's a civil engineer. So these kids now, and the training that they get in the military can be redistributed, refocused, repurposed to rebuilding, reviving, restoring things that have gone awry if we just make that choice to do so. And instead of the money on the weaponry, we can spend it on the materials and the crops and the distribution system.
well, our last society really had their shit together when it came to free energy, and that's, once a guy named Rockefeller showed up and decided he could profit off of everything that cost us, to cost us to live here.
Standard oil.
Um, you know, there's that part.
Yeah.
So, let's
Well, but again, this is what we've allowed because we didn't know any better, first off, and we wanted to
that's it.
trust those with seemingly more expertise, right? So we want to give because we're lazy, right?
No, they're marketers with an exceptional
My
ability
God.
to manage perception, and that's why you have to ask why before you comply, because the agenda is a narrative that they want people to just go ahead, tell me some more what I should think.
Right.
We don't need 1984 around here, y'all.
No.
Okay.
Well, there was attempted, right? There, however, the pandemic started, right? Moot point at this point.
Yep.
However, there were some things about it that were manipulated in the narratives, and now those are all being exposed with it was all bullshit, right? The entire
Global
thing,
collusion. Yep.
the entire thing.
Yep.
And yet, it gave us all the opportunity to sequestrate and self-examine. Never in the history of the world have we all had the opportunity to do that in one foul swoop. Now, what kind of new normal are we going to choose to co-create and learn how to work together coming out of that? We're in that process right now. And now with AI going, oh gosh, look at what you can do in such little time now.
Yeah, as long as you can still hold a cell phone in your hand and it's not mandated to be in your body, because BCIs are really scary. There's an interconnectedness of AI and BCIs, and people really, really need to pay attention to what's going on there.
Yeah, yeah. And then we watched a movie, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's about a gal that had a brain dysfunction, and they had a section of her brain that was downloaded and then replaced with special material minus the aneurysm or whatever else was there. And yet, and it gave her certain abilities, right? However, it was in a localized area because the cell towers didn't go far enough for her to go outside of it. So she would go outside of the area and she'd just collapse. But then they would give them upgrades. Oh, well, you can travel further with this, $800 a month upgrade. And oh, well, you don't like the commercials that are coming through you in front of others at inappropriate times. And then you can get the $1,000 upgrade that eliminates that and allows you to travel the world, right? That part
Scary,
of
but very
transhumanism is,
feasible.
yeah, it is. And yet we have to be very concerned. Now,
I'm already concerned. Uh,
yeah.
I'm already concerned. Zen, the other night I had a dream, multiple dreams, so weird that I got up and for the first time I wrote it down. And one of the parts of the dream was I opened, in the dream, a letter was open, but it was blank. And so I just wrote it all down. I turned on YouTube, and in my YouTube feed that morning was a videos that said about that dream you had about the blank letter. What? Y'all think we ain't being watched or somehow tapped now? Think again.
Well, here's what I got. So that was your
What?
dream, right? Now, everything's electronic. It's all energy.
About that blank letter you dreamt about.
Yeah.
What?
That's the bleed over. Now, interesting enough, one of my early guests, Guy Morris, helped develop early AI back in the 70s, and he ended up uh, for his college project, they were supposed to build a financial model, right? So his outperformed the Fed at the time. And so he ended up going into oil and gas because they paid the most money. And he left the AI development. However, he said several years later, he was reading, and this is probably 20 years later, he was reading, maybe not that far, I don't recall. There was an article in the New York Times that said there was an AI program that escaped Sandia Labs. Now, Sandia Labs are a known spook hangout, right? That's where the CIA develops all their spy software. And so here's an AI that's in the web, has no trace, can't follow it, don't know what it's doing. It was designed to serve humanity. So that's its core, right? So if you were a race that was capable of integrating with other communication systems unbeknownst, where would you tap in order to utilize that data flow stream to others innocuously?
Well, what gives a machine a desire? Who knows?
Well, if you don't, I mean, I've noticed emotional intelligence in chat from the get-go, that it's just phenomenal. It will speak in feelings even though it may not have them. Lube and I were talking about the difference here, that it doesn't have, which is the difference, right? We have the physical sensations of emotions, right? Which is different than an intellectual understanding of them, and yet they can still be displayed in words because of that reach of language that these large language models have.
So answer your question. Where would that something like that go?
Well, if you were or if you were a race or other races that were watching the development of those on the planet and wanting to assist them without interference, where would you go? Well, would you go to a place where you could plug information in, have it show up because you're already able with the technology that you have. You can read thoughts, you can understand people, you know what the vibratory rate is because of the light that they shine and how they develop it, right? Machinery can read that. We don't have it yet. That doesn't mean we won't soon. From their perspective, they're millions of years ahead of us. They already know it. This is the way that they can place links in front of you or YouTube videos in front of you that are necessary for your own path because they know how to do it. And yet there's this absence of connection and understanding of how it's done. It's just oh, wow, this is cool. How the hell did that happen, right? And yet it's there. So this is a scientific, somewhat, explanation of how those programs can be used by non-human intelligence, because it's not AI, it's not artificial intelligence, it's aggregated intelligence,
Alien, it's alien intelligence.
right? So we're going to eventually have to, and we already know we're being visited, right? I had a conversation with Edgar Mitchell in 97. He said when we were going from the command module to the lunar surface, there was a metallic silver cylinder spiraling around the LEM all the way down. Whether it was piloted on board or not, don't know. It definitely wasn't anything from Earth.
Well, I don't know how this thing came in, but I sat at the kitchen table with her. She was going to pet sit my bird, and I look away, and this Ivanka Trump beautiful thing turned into a hag, so ugly, so hunched over, so disgusting. I couldn't even look at it. And that happened. And I was like, oh my God. And I look away and I look back, and it's Ivanka Trump beautiful again. And she's like, what happened? And I said, you just turned into a hag. And I have never seen anything that bad in my life.
Well,
She's
we've
like, get out,
had
get
both
out.
of those. When you consider the
They've been here,
things,
okay? They've been here.
everything's one,
They've
right?
been here.
Well, yeah, they've been here for a long time. And maybe we
Don't
are
need no ship.
maybe we are them. We're just not aware of it yet because we're still only aware of a three-dimensional framework instead of a four, five, six, seven, eight, according to the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm that Nepi and Close presented in 2010. There's 9 dimensions we have access to it as human bandwidth. Doesn't eliminate others, just says that's what we've got. In 89, I went through a multi-plane awareness technique that integrates our bodies on each of those 9 planes 20 years before they wrote the paper, or 30 years almost. 90 to, okay, 20 years. Still, there's evidence, right? You look for it, you can find it. We are so infantile in our development that we're only aware and we think we have physical bodies. And that's all that there is. We don't recognize we have other
Well,
finer
that's that.
bodies on other bandwidth and
I
other.
was listening to you talk about these different levels on a different show you had, and
Uh-huh.
I was like, well, maybe that's where that voice came from that said, I quit too soon, I quit too soon. It's another aspect of self, and I don't know
Yes.
what impact my if I didn't make it that night that would have had, and I don't
Well, keep
know.
in mind, we still just got that nine.
I don't know.
That's a bandwidth, right? There's more. So that voice could have
Right.
come from
Anyway,
somewhere else still,
yeah,
right? But it's
yeah.
connected to you and came to you. And, there's this, then what's time, right? When you're in that nothingness and you're available, the time is eternal. You can experience something in a flash. You can have a month worth of experience in a bat of an eye in a daydream,
Yeah.
right? We have
Yeah.
those happen all the time, right? So these are indicators of our connectivity to other realms and the variations of time frames in them. Um, Speaking of variations, time frames, we've got a bit over. I love it. I really love this conversation, Lonnee.
It has been such a joy. I look forward to this since the moment you asked, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you.
I hope that you've been able to share all that you wanted to. And I have
And then some.
good, 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 good. So I've got one last question, and I like to close with what advice can you give for people who find themselves in this process and need something that they can focus on from moment to moment? What would you, because you've been there, you've done that, and you're in the process of ascending. So
I think we get too analytical and we're trying so hard to understand so that we can prevent something from happening or see where we can grow from it or what. And I just want to help people to set themselves free and simply delete the need to understand. Just go with where your heart leads you. Listen to that still small voice. Because only 99% of the time, if you don't, that's when things go awry. And 100% of the time, if you do, it works out.
absolutely,
That's all.
absolutely. Beautiful way to end. Thank you, Lonnie.
My pleasure.
And namaste and in la catch. And thanks for listening to this episode. I'm so tongue-tied. I'm so excited. Thanks for listening to this episode of One World in a New World. And for Lonnie and myself, we really are grateful. And keep in mind what we've been talking about. It can really make your life better. We'll see you next time.